We have amazing speakers on the panel today. I'm super excited for this one. I think we're going to get started. Christian will probably join a little bit later, but that's okay. So I'd like to welcome everybody in the audience to this community call. This is the January 2024 community call, the first one of the year. So this will be recorded and then posted to YouTube. So if you guys can't stay for the whole call, or if you have friends who have to miss it, it will be available on YouTube. So thank you for being here. Thank you for your interest and participation in Hedera. So today we're going to have a couple presentations. We have Patches who will talk about HCS20, which is this really cool standard that's kind of new to Hedera. We have Solo, who will give a recap of his experience in Davos at the World Economic Forum. So that'll be really cool hearing from a community member. And then we have Andrew Aitken, who is the Chief Open Source Officer for Hedera, who will share with us Hedera's open source strategy, which is super exciting. And then if Christian joins later, he will also give more information about his experience at Davos. So thank you so much to all of the speakers for being here today and for sharing your expertise and your experience with the community. So we're going to get started with Solo. So Solo, welcome to the stage. Welcome as a speaker. If you could start with an introduction of who you are and your experience, and then go on and talk about your experience in Davos, that would be amazing.
Oh, awesome. Going first. Excited. What's up, guys? My name is Solo Ceesay. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Calaxy, the social wallet, if you will, if you guys have seen that on Twitter. But yeah, we've been building in Hedera for a number of years. I should note that my co-founder is Spencer Dinwiddie, who plays on the Brooklyn Nets. So you guys have probably seen us within the community. As was mentioned, been a part of the community for a number of years at this point. And so, before I get started, I do have a couple of words just to, start off. As being a community member, I wanted to make sure that we took the time to thank the community deeply. It's been a number of years that we've been building in the ecosystem, have known Patches and, other community members for years. I can see a lot of people down in the audience, and I think, Calaxy is a testament to how powerful this community is, and really what's really possible given, all of the bright minds and individuals contributing to this ecosystem. And so it is, in no small part that, my ability to attend Davos and, be alongside the Hedera team is a testament to this community. And, we genuinely appreciate all the support. So thank you guys on that side of things. And then also, before Christian gets here, but Christian's Swirlds team as well, Zenobia, Lena, the entire team, putting together a great event at Davos and letting me play a small part in that and being able to attend and really see what it looks like on the other side. It's no small surprise or no small gesture whatsoever. So we appreciate that as well from the Calaxy side. To get started, I have a couple of takeaways to go through. We can talk through each of them, but then also talking about some action steps and moving forward. We are part of the community, we do a lot of Hedera's marketing, before we get Christian Hasker on here. But I think that one thing that makes our community so unique is that you'll have random people in this audience responding to random tweets from strangers about how great Hedera is, and how we have a solution to virtually every problem that's ever, come to man. And so I think, one thing that's really important is for us to get on the same page and really take, some of the learnings that we've had from, a place like Davos, where you're able to get together with collective, the biggest and brightest minds of the world, our world leaders and people who really influence change, and the people we honestly need to sell into pushing our technology forward. So I'm going to take a second to talk through those takeaways, and then finish off with some of the action steps that each of the parties on this call could probably take based off of my vantage point and the things that I've learned. So the first one, I would say that it's increasingly important based off of the meetings that had taken place. And I guess to take a step back, when you think about Davos and the World Economic Forum, there's two parts to it. I would say Davos is specifically a small village in Switzerland, where a lot of people meet for the World Economic Forum every year. They conduct their annual meeting there, but at the same time, a lot of these Fortune 500 leaders, as well as different government officials and world leaders, all use that time to meet at Davos, where they have a number of different business meetings, political meetings behind closed doors, things that they ordinarily would have a little bit of trouble scheduling. What Hedera did really well is obviously the presence there was at the Belvedere Hotel, which is a unbelievably beautiful hotel, by the way. They did a great job with the branding, and it was amazing just walking in and seeing HBAR everywhere. And their presence was popping. There wasn't a second where we didn't have foot traffic in there. And it was located in the secure zone, so you really need some pretty high profile credentials to be able to get in there. And so what my first point is when you're talking to these Fortune 500 reps who've been able to enter the secure zone and spend time with the Hedera team, what I noticed from the conversations that we had is that we really do need to get to a point where, there's less jargon or obscure terminologies, because it might be viewed potentially as even not condescending, but it can be uninviting to people, especially the people of influence that typically, these guys tend to, quote, know everything, right? As we all come to know. And so it's very important for us when we're talking about our technology and how impactful it can be, to really meet them where they're at versus kind of trying to alienate and, differentiate us. It's really, we have a different way of doing things, but we're really all trying to accomplish, the same thing, with the, benefits of decentralization and some other things that are, a little bit deeper into technology, but it's really important, to really meet those people where they're at to communicate its promise. The second thing I would say as well is when you're talking Hedera's value proposition, honestly, Web3's value proposition as a whole, it isn't exclusive to things it isn't exclusive to things around the concept of decentralization. I think one thing to consider is when you're thinking about this group of people, decentralization is not, by any means something that is binary. And it's also, and given that it's scalar, there's certain things in the world that do need to be decentralized, but there are arguments to be made about why things probably don't need to be. And so it's not necessarily the concept that decentralization as a blanket topic is better, but rather, it's really important to understand where, decentralization as a value proposition really has the most promise, in making sure that when you're communicating that to, these different types of world leaders and powerful individuals, it doesn't also undermine the societal structures in place that benefit, those parties. And that's something I probably wouldn't say all too loud while you're walking down the halls there, but, obviously the centralized world has, it unfairly benefits, several parties. And so I think it's very important, that when you do have these discussions, you really think about, how you communicate to them if you choose to win them over. I think it's a lot more impactful, honestly, to lead with other things like efficiency, greater TAM, and the internationalization of money as these different prongs to get the conversation started with some of these individuals. I had the chance to introduce Hedera to some banking professionals that I had the chance to work with in my previous life while I was an investment banker. And, I think the conversation was really great behind closed doors because ordinarily, a lot of these banks are apprehensive to decentralized technologies. But what makes Hedera quite unique is that, it being super green, it being high throughput, really allows it to be a technology that can swap in and out of what they're currently using with, all those added benefits, versus some other blockchains that aren't as green or don't have those same initiatives. A lot of these banks have a lot of, and I know this from my previous life, a lot of these banks have some great aspirations to go carbon neutral by X date into the future. And so Hedera can play a very big role in that and leading with that as a concept versus, decentralization is important because the little guy needs to win. This is all true. And while we all might believe that, it's just something that doesn't get the conversation started when there's, X amount of priorities that, Fortune 500 CEO might have in front of them. Lastly, I would say in terms of the takeaways that we have is that the UX in Web3 needs to not only get to pari passu or at par with Web2, but it honestly needs to leapfrog Web 2. And what I mean by that is we need to introduce the net new benefits to the end user that otherwise would be impossible if we chose to build the same infrastructure in a Web 2 paradigm. And so I think a good example of this actually is Sandra Campos. She was on the panel that we had at some point during Davos, and she's a board member of Big Lots and PetMed. And she had been asked the question, talking about decentralization, talking about Web3 technologies and how, large enterprise thinks about it. And to be honest, she was very honest with it in saying that it's something that people are looking into. I think with the recent happenings, or not so recent at this point, but with FTX and some of the turmoil that had taken place in the ecosystem, not too long ago, that definitely shifted down the priority ladder. But it's definitely something that is still being looked at. But the problem often lies in what that actual experience looks like. A lot of these Fortune 500 companies are, thinking about building their own wallets or building their own infrastructure to use blockchain technologies when, the products that we have in our ecosystem, the technology is amazing. The underlying technology that underpins this, the equivalent of the AWS or Google Cloud in Hedera, is amazing, but there's still a shortage of real world products that make this tangible for the Fortune 500 CEO. And so I think there's a consistent effort and focus that needs to be applied to different types of infrastructure pieces within the world of Web3 if we're hoping to onboard these communities. And so I think that's something that I saw that was quite beneficial when you're using something like Calaxy, because it was able to be quite tangible, put it into the hands, they can install it within a couple of seconds. They can really see its promise versus, sending them a white paper and being a little bit, a couple levels higher in conversation. I think getting down to the nitty gritty and the details and showing them the how, what, and why is essentially what we really need to uncover in the next little bit. But moving forward, and I appreciate obviously the time, but just to wrap this up, I think we need to deeply question and understand our journey here, but acknowledge that the pathway ahead must be different if we wish to attract new personas to Web3. And what that essentially means is, it's quite easy for us to get into an echo chamber. We love Web3 and its promise for, all the reasons that aren't what I mentioned above, right? Like it's not because there are great products that are making our lives easier. The products currently are being built by the people on this call. We believe in the power of decentralized world and how important that is to a freer, more collaborative world. But thinking about the future and what's going to attract that next 100 million people, their value proposition may not have anything to do with those, or the value proposition that speaks to them mostly might not have anything to do with what has done well in the past. Additionally, it's important for us to start with the end user and work backwards. I think this is something that Steve Jobs has famously, spoke about ad nauseum with Apple and their product strategy, and something we try to replicate as best as we can in our small startup Calaxy. But it's very important to really work from the end user and really showcase the promise of the technology in solving what they're particularly interested in versus trying to get people to meet us where we're at. And then very lastly, and this is kind of, the same point, but really got to sell the benefits, not the technology. We really have to sell Hedera and its project, its use cases, and champion why they're made possible because of Hedera, or why they're more efficient because they're of Hedera. But instead of thinking about the underlying technology and how amazing it is in concept, really, I think the next step of this moving forward, and what I've been able to unpack from, a quite eventful week at Davos, during the World Economic Forum is, these are the key things that we really need to take upon ourselves as an ecosystem to really help push adoption forward and really take our industry a couple steps into the future. But if that isn't the best opportunity of a lifetime to move forward, I don't know what is. And so I think moving forward, I couldn't have been more grateful to have attended Davos with the Hedera team. They did a great job on the activation. Take everything I might say with a grain of salt. Just another person in the room, but I think we did a great job in pushing that value proposition forward, and hopefully doing our part in making Web3 just that much more available and accessible to the next 100 million people. But with that, that's it from my side. Obviously, appreciate you guys and happy to answer any questions should we have any, or if there's time to do so at any point in time. But thank you guys for having me.
Solo, thank you so much for your recap. It is incredibly valuable to have someone who is so deeply invested in Hedera, but also in the community, to come up here and really share their perspective on, one of the biggest events of the year and what you learned from that. And you are doing such amazing work, not only with Calaxy, but for the greater Web3 ecosystem, in exactly what you were talking about, building a consumer product that is actually tangible and that can bring the ideation of the technology into real life. Because it's one thing to have the best technology, but if you're not using it, what is it really worth? So thank you for everything that you do for Hedera and for the community. If anyone has questions, you can ask them in the chat box on the side. And now I will give the stage to Christian. So Christian, you also went to Davos, and you will be sharing with us from your position, your recap of Davos, and some highlights from the Hedera team. So Christian, welcome to the stage.
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Hopefully you can hear me loudly and clearly.
Loud and clear.
Okay, great. And it was wonderful to hear from Solo. I will say that it's always good at events. Davos is a little bit different. We'll talk about that. But at events to showcase the ecosystem. So in Davos, Solo was there, Sammy from Blade was there, and Matt from Utopian Lab were there. And when you have the community representing and being able to talk about, why they're building first in Web3 and then why they chose Hedera, that's a very compelling argument. That's so much more credible than me talking about it. So we really appreciate the involvement, and hopefully there are more opportunities at future events. So just a quick retrospective from me, and I think it's important to contrast what we did in early 2023 in Davos versus what we did in early 2024, because we applied learnings from 2023 to the 2024 event. So if we rewind just over a year to Davos 2023, we had a dedicated presence on the promenade in Davos. And as Solo talked about, Davos is a smallish ski town up in the Swiss Alps, beautiful vistas and, lovely. And bisecting the town is the road called the promenade. And that's where the shops and bars, and restaurants and stuff are. And you have companies taking over these shops and bars and restaurants and converting them into these establishments where you're trying to pull people in, and you do demos, you do programming. And what we found, even though it looked fantastic in 2023, the presence was good, the branding was good, it was really hard to pull in C-level executives into that space. So one of the learnings that we took away was, maybe we should go to where these executives are already. And that led us to the Belvedere Hotel, which is one of the main hotels where the delegation that goes to WEF stays. You have a lot of C-suite, you have a lot of policymakers, and that led to us taking over the bar. As Solo talked about, I think the branding, Claudio does such a good job on branding. Zenobia talks about how we punch above our weight. Like if we contrast our presence with some large companies there, household name companies. Like, we're definitely holding our own, but obviously we're a lot smaller and, maybe not as well resourced, but we put on a good show. So the bar was packed all the time. We had these dedicated times during the day where we would offer food and refreshments, evening cocktails, and that was a really good place for networking. In fact, my favorite sessions of the day were the early morning breakfasts, because it wasn't packed and you were able to have some very good conversations with folks. It's a total soft sell in Davos. No one wants to be hit over the head with a sales pitch, right? It's not that kind of place. So it's very much, opening up a conversation about how the week is going, things that they're interested in, excited about, etc. And then that invariably leads into, well, tell me a little bit about Hedera, because they're sitting in the space, they're surrounded by it all. And then having the council member logos, I found that a really good entry point, because invariably you were talking to someone from either a similar industry or maybe a competitive company, and that was a really nice way to just segue into Hedera, what makes Hedera a little bit different. Now the proof is going to be in the pudding, right? We did get some of these good contacts and conversations going. How do they convert?
Christian, I think we lost you there. Can you guys still hear him?
No, I think he rubbed.
Okay.
No, I can't. I think you got rogue.
Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
And he's
yeah.
back. Okay.
I can now.
Okay.
Both tones, both the high and the heard.
Where did I lose you? Probably not far, because I
you were
heard
talking
Mika
about
say.
You were talking about
Conversion.
Yeah.
You were talking about
Yes. So that is really where it's yet to be decided. Is this a really good investment? Because if 6 months down the road we have a thriving council member pipeline with good use cases that we can point back to Davos, then we'll say, yeah, that's fantastic. If some of these things just turn into dead ends, then then is it a good use of time and resources? Because coming off of any event, you've probably all been to events that you get that kind of sugar high after an event, right? So, oh, that was amazing. Had so many good conversations, met some wonderful people, friendships for life. But then that sugar high kind of wears off, and it's like, okay, what did we actually accomplish? So I think that's really important. We had some private events as well. We had one event centered on tokenizing everything from the clothes on your back to your ticket to space. We had a private lunch targeted at chief financial officers and investment folks all around digital assets. And then we had a lunch that was focused at chief technical officers, chief information officers. And that was all around how blockchain can govern everything from AI to the future of money. That one, the consensus feedback is that one was the most successful. And it was the most successful because it was anchored on an actual use case announcement at the event. Jonathan Doughton, who many of you in the community may know from Stanford and USC, doing the Project Starling framework, he now has his own startup that's focused on responsible AI, and that is anchored using Hedera. So that was just great. That led to a lot of press interviews for Jonathan, a lot of exposure for Hedera, because we caught the wave of AI being a super hot topic this year. And, sometimes these things are more by luck than judgment, but we did try very hard to work with Jonathan behind the scenes and push for this announcement there. So it all came together really well. The last thing I'll talk about is, earlier I talked about the importance of having the ecosystem show up. Still also important to have council members show up because they are talking in large part to their peers and telling the Hedera story from their own centric viewpoint is very effective. So we had representatives from ServiceNow, from Avery Dennison, from Aberdeen, from DLA Piper Toko, and we had our independent board member, Monique Morrow there, who is very plugged into the telco space. So that was great. And then there was a contingent from Hedera, Charles Atkins, the new president. He was there. I think he had a lot of his own meetings set up and was very busy. We had Nilmani Rubin, Chief Policy Officer, there, a lot of policy folks, so it was great for her to be there. And then we have Betsabe Boitatis, who is the Chief Financial Officer for Hedera, and she had a lot of good meetings as well. So a good event. Let's see how it translates, and maybe 6 months down the road we can come back and report back and say, you know what, actually this was really effective, or this area wasn't so effective. These are our learnings for next year.
Christian, thank you so much for your insights. As the CMO of Swirlds Labs, you do most of the marketing, or you're in charge of most of the marketing for Hedera. So I think it's super valuable for the community to hear you speak and hear your insights on this massive event and sort of see how you're thinking about everything. I think that's super valuable. We do have a few questions from the audience in the chat box. So if you'd like to answer those, please do so. If not, that's okay. Just let us know if you'd like to answer them or not.
Always looking for voice work. Of course, I do voice work, and now AI has taken my job. So that will be interesting to... I'll take this question about expiry of council members. So there were, I forget how many, but in December there were X number of initial council members whose terms were expiring. They were automatically, no one decided to leave the council, so their terms were renewed for a new 3-year consecutive term. And it is a great point that I don't know where we have publicly facing where their terms are. So I'm going to take that as an action item there. And it's not that they're deferred. It's not that their initial 3-year term starts until the 39 members are in place. They're actually sort of well into their terms already. And then there's one from Matt. Yes, I would say everyone now knows of blockchain. I think there is a conflation of blockchain with cryptocurrency. And when you talk about cryptocurrency, it's a very divisive topic with a lot of these C-level executives, which is why talking about use cases is really the way to go, because it reorients people over what they can do with blockchain versus this preconception maybe that it's just about internet-based money that people can move around, and maybe they have a almost negative feeling of what can be done with that. And then data sharing, 95% of the time goes to onboarding. Yeah, I mean, I think Stolo talked a lot about onboarding and there are barriers to entry today that we just collectively as an industry have to remove. And on that front, I would be remiss in not mentioning that prior to Davos, Lehman was in St. Moritz at this private event, CFC St. Moritz, and announced alongside the Algorand Foundation the founding of this DREC alliance. Lehman for a long time has said that we won't be able to make it easy for new users if they still have to record seed phrases and be worried about where they're storing those seed phrases. So DREC is this protocol which allows people to never have to access their seed phrase. It's sort of segmented into little pieces and automatically stored on devices among a group of unknown helpers that collectively can restore the key. So these kind of things that are cross industry are going to be really, really important. I'm proud that Hedera and Lehman, of course, have taken like a lead role in pulling together some of these ecosystem players.
Christian, thank you so much.
Yeah, and just that last thing on the GC, I'm making a note of that. I think we'll find out where the list is. I do know that there were several council members that were automatically renewed at the end of the year, so that data should be somewhere.
Christian, thank you so much for taking the time to answer these questions. I think everyone really appreciates it. Pluto, I see your question and we'll get an answer for this and clarification for this off the call. Also, I want to mention that let me know in the comments what you guys want to see in future community calls as well. So let me know your feedback and thoughts. We're always trying to iterate on everything. And also, we hear you. We know that Discord right now is not the best. We are really trying different restreaming options. So in the future, we're looking forward to that as well. But
when Calaxy for our community call.
It's so funny, Solo and I were talking about something like that yesterday.
We have something. Portals. It's coming soon.
Something portals. Yeah. Cool. Yeah, thank you so much, Christian. So, okay, let's move on because time is running and I want to respect everyone's time. So, next speaker is Andrew Aitken. So Andrew, thank you so much for being here. Please give us an introduction on who you are and what you do and what your mission with Hedera is.
Sure, thanks Mika. Definitely excited to be here. So as you might, my name is Andrew Aitken. I am the Chief Open Source Officer for Hedera, and I do have 2 slides. Sorry about that, but I do. As you may see from my picture, besides my wife and my daughter and Hedera, my primary passion is skiing. I live in a small ski town in the Colorado mountains called Durango, except for a 22-year detour in Silicon Valley, I also grew up in other ski towns, Crested Butte and Vail, and so I'm definitely a mountain guy here.
Sorry, Andrew, I don't think we see the slides. Can you guys see the slides?
No, I haven't shared them yet.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I was going to do that, the intro, and then share them in a minute. Let's get a little bit of background first. So I've been in open source for probably close to 25 years. I almost hate to admit. I was probably one of the first people to wear a suit in open source because back then someone needed to. I no longer wear a suit. I think I'd lose all credibility if I did today. But back then they needed kind of a professional face, and I had over for 10 years. I had a boutique consultancy, and we did strategy for firms like Microsoft and Intel and IBM and HP, and and a number of large global enterprises around their open source strategies, helping them figure out how, why, and when to get involved in open source. And so that's really the side that I've come from. I am less than 6 months into my tenure with Hedera and in Web3. So I want to get that right out there. I expect to learn a lot from everyone here, and that's one of the most exciting things that I've begun to experience. This is a really, really complicated ecosystem, which makes it a bit of a challenge, but also really exciting to be a part of. So with that, I will share a couple of slides. When you can see them.
Yes, we can see them.
Okay, I'm trying to put them into slideshow mode. Can you see them now?
Yes, we see them.
Okay, all right. So I'm going to go back into slideshow. All right, so I apologize at the bottom. I copied this over a previous presentation. This is not private and confidential, else I wouldn't be sharing it here on the Discord community call. That was simply a copy and paste error on my part. So we're going to, the best way to kind of think about how we're going to focus is we're going to do open source right. And again, I've been doing open source in the Web 2 world for almost 25 years. And I've seen a lot of what works and a lot of what hasn't worked. And I've done a lot right, and I've also done some things that haven't worked. So we're going to take all those learnings and we're going to help Hedera and the community do open source right. And let me tell you a little bit more about what that actually means. So first off, I've shared a little bit about myself. I've recently brought on board an open source community manager who has a lot of great background, Samson Gode. He's in the process of joining right now. If any of you are based in London, he will be there next week at the State of Open UK conference, and I'm sure he'd be glad to connect with you if any of you want to reach out and hear more about what we're doing. And doing open source right means that as we invest in all these different activities, we want to bring in the learnings from the community. And I certainly have my own background, and many people at Swirlds, Patches you're going to hear from, have a lot of open source background. But I brought on board one lady to help us with our strategy named Diane Mueller. She was head of Red Hat community for 10.5 years. She is a CNCF Kubernetes ambassador, and she's actually on retainer by linuxkernel.org as a consultant. So she has awesome experience. We've joined the Community Accelerator program led by a gentleman named Jono Bacon, who literally wrote the book on community. He has 2 bestsellers on Amazon. One's called The Art of Community, and the other is called People Powered. So we're a part of his accelerator program to really take the learnings not only from him, but from 20 plus peers who are also a member of the program to make sure that we're getting a lot of external feedback on how we move some of these community initiatives forward. I'm really excited about the work that this firm Bitergia is doing. So Bitergia really created open source community metrics. They launched the Chaos Community, which stands for health metrics around open source, and they're building us a custom open source community analytics dashboard that we'll be rolling out here in a few months, and so we'll be able to see who's engaged, where they're engaged, how they're engaged in our community, how they're engaged in other communities. Where else are you all participating? We want to see and understand and know that so that we can also bring some of what you may be doing in other communities back to what we're going to be doing in our open source community. We want to be the leading voice across the ecosystem. So we're already members of the Hyperledger Foundation. We're already members of FinOS, which is the FinTech Open Source Foundation, which has amongst its members 40 of the largest financial services institutions on the planet. Their objective is to open source a lot of the software that they are themselves building, which they've been doing for the last last 5 years, and we're actually on the board of that organization. The OpenSSF, Open Source Software Security Foundation, that's to ensure that we're engaged with the community that is driving software security best practices around software. It's a really well-respected group driven by some of the largest vendors in our ecosystem. We'll be joining the Open Wallet Foundation very soon, and 4 or 5 others. So again, we're not only going to be creating our own, or creating is the wrong term, enhancing our own community, but we're going to be a part of a much, much broader ecosystem. That's really important for us. We're going to be doing a lot of events. Many of them are going to be supported or driven by the Swirlds team here and Christian. We're excited about that. So next week, again, Samson will be speaking at State of Open UK. We're participating. I'll actually be talking at F Denver. So if any of you are there, please let me know. That's the end of next month. Lehman and I are going to have a keynote at the Open Source Summit, FINOS conferences, all things open. And we're also going to be hosting and sponsoring a number of different micro events. So these will be sprints and SIGs and user group meetings and things like that. And we are going to be launching an open source foundation this year. So this is my second slide, and let me talk a little bit about that. So this was authorized by the Hedera Governing Council over a year ago, that they wanted to move all of our software underneath an open source foundation. You can see here, these are draft. We are cranking on this. And it will be launched in the first half of this year. But that's what I have here. The reason I have the term draft here is because we're finalizing all these things as every single day we're working on this. So we really want to create and support a developer ecosystem building enterprise-related applications, tools, libraries, and enhancements to the core platform capabilities. The goals, and this is really for y'all, we want to provide a world-class developer experience that makes you want to come to the foundation, to stay and build lots of cool stuff. That's really what it's going to be. We're going to operate very transparently. It is going to be meritocratic. So people like in almost all traditional open source projects and foundations, you earn your way into positions of responsibility, and we're going to be transparent about how that happens. We want to drive deeper engagement across our council members. We have some really super council members and council representatives, but we want to be more connected to the open source developer teams within our council members and get them more engaged in our ecosystem. And we want to obviously accelerate the applications that are running on the core platform in the Hedera network. And we want to really focus on making sure that we're building out a kind of a complete and functional ecosystem and fill any work with our community and produce a product roadmap that helps us really ensure that we have an end-to-end set of applications and features for the network. So those are my 2 slides. That's my conversation. I'm really excited to be a part of this. And let me see, it's not actually letting me close that screen. There we go. And so we're getting a ton of support. We're doing this really closely with Swirlds. A number of their people are focused on working with myself and others within Hedera to make this happen. And really want to, again, I'm a Web 2 guy. And pretty proud to admit that, and I have a lot to learn about Web3, but I hope to see many of you participating in the open source foundation that we're going to be launching here soon. So happy to, let's see if there are any potential questions for me. How much do I pay for a haircut? That's interesting. It looks cultivated. Well, I'm glad I'm not looking too scraggly, I guess, as it were. That's a good thing. Let's see. It looks like there are. Love the slides. I'll be happy to share the slides. and we'll be giving you regular updates. And also, I'll have Samson on the community calls, and we'll also be talking about in the future specific ways that you all can get engaged, and the tools and the resources that we'll be providing. And we want your feedback. Really, if we're providing stuff out there or missing something, then we need to hear from you. That's really, really important.
Andrew, thank you so much for your presentation. I think the community is very appreciative, clearly, and it's really great to have insight into what's going on internally in terms of the strategy for open source. So yeah, thank you so much for sharing that with us. Everyone's looking forward to seeing where this goes. Yeah, and thank you for the slides. Okay, so we have about 10 minutes left, so we'll move on to our last speaker, who is Patches. So Patches, most of the community knows you, but if you could start with a short introduction, that would be amazing. Thank you for being here.
Hey, how's it going? I'm Patches. Been developing on Hedera for about 3 years. Created a multitude of different projects, from Hgraph Punks to Turtle Moon. Co-founded Hgraph.io, which is an API provider. I've done, some open source tooling like NFT mass minting tools. And most recently, at the end of last year, I was hired by Swirlds Labs to be the senior product manager of the tokenization and consensus service on Hedera. So super stoked for that. I've been really loving my new role, being able to interact with the community still, and have a more intimate understanding and helping drive the technology from the inside of Swirlds. And this is a presentation about a new standardization called HCS20. So I'm just jumping right into it because we got 10 minutes. So the idea behind HCS20 is just to bring some standardization to the Hedera consensus service. So we have the token service, which we're seeing a giant, meme coin / DEX DeFi resurgence in our ecosystem, which is amazing to see. And then we also have something called the consensus service. And this is what, if you know, Atma, a lot of the billions of transactions on Hedera are the consensus service. And there's a lot of different ways that you can use it. The biggest issue is that it's so versatile that it's very hard to approach because it's a kind of choice paralysis. And so picking where to begin is very difficult because there's no common entry point, or there's no easily conceptualization because it's just so versatile. So HCS20 at its most basic, okay. All right, that's not the slide. This is the slide. Overview. What is HCS20? Why was it created? Applications of it, and then future developments. So that's what I'm going to go over. And this is the slide I thought I was going to. So all HCS20 is a standard to record and track the movement of data on the consensus service. It's a very, very, very simple concept, but then when you start getting into it, it gets complicated and complicated and complicated. So I want that to be when anyone asks, or when you're really questioning what is a HCS20, it's just a JSON standard to record and track movement on the Hedera consensus service. So if you go to hcs20.com, it'll take you to this site. And if you are a little bit on the technical side, you can read and see not only the JSON structure, but then also the validation logic that that is in the standard to determine the current state. So if I were to send one HBAR to Pluto from Hashgraph, the ability to see that balance from the Hedera token service is very, very easy. This is another way of moving something from a wallet to a wallet that's not a token, but can still be documented and then read of the current state of that movement. So we have deploy, we have mint, we have burn, and then we have transfer. So there's only 4 very basic things that you can do. And the intent is to bring some versatility and some conceptualization, again, to the consensus service. So why was it created? There's a lot of innovation happening And they all kind of bump up against this one problem, which is, okay, if you're a Web3 game on Ethereum and you have leaderboards and those points can then be used to buy in-game assets, people in that game want to know that you're not just giving 50,000 points to a person and then they're getting that free asset and they're selling on secondary, because there's no trust. We need full transparency in a decentralized, Web3 game. This would give the ability not only to track when the points are created and who they're given to, it would give an ability for a player who thinks there might be foul play to audit the log through an indexer. It would index all of the balances and say, okay, well, this is what I got and what you have over here is wrong compared to what the audit trail is. And it reduces the cost of the game by an insane amount, especially if they're on something like Polygon. So it enables an easier user experience for the movement of assigned value on Hedera, and it enhances transparency where people can audit that movement. So, and my example is a game. The last thing that it does and why it was created is to highlight Hedera's unique strength. Right now, something called BRC20 is a Bitcoin JSON standard that this was kind of taken from, or a lot of the attributes have the same name. And it's gone to Litecoin, it's gone to Dogecoin, it's gone to Polygon, it's gone to Ethereum. All of these networks are adopting something called inscription. And the way that you inscribe has the biggest part of all of those ecosystems with the most adoption are these RC20 type. On their networks, they call them tokens. Here, I call them points. And so when you go to Dogecoin and you execute an inscription on that network, and then you come to Hedera and you execute and doing the same thing technically, you have a very easy one-to-one relationship of comparison to say, oh, wow, like on Hedera, it was 1/100th of a penny, and it happened in 3 seconds. And on Doge, it was multiple dollars and finished in a couple of minutes. And so it's an easy comparison of not only a common meta that all of Web3 is currently in, but it also it shows that user experience change so that they can understand one-to-one the benefits are highlighted. And I think we have a really contextual thing to point to as HTS, right? If you come from Polygon and then you come over to Hedera and you're interacting with Saucer Swap or HeliSwap, you can see that juxtaposition and see the qualities of the Hedera technology. And this is just doing it in a little bit of a different way with a meta that is kind of forefront of mind right now in a lot of ecosystems. So the applications of it are very, very high. And they're beyond my even initial conceptualization of this standard. The day that I released this, Matt Smitty's from Dovu updated his API of tracking ESG. And now they're tracking ESG with HCS20 on the Hedera consensus service because you can deploy, it's immutable, you can have an audit trail, you can move it from account to account or entity to entity, and all of that can then be read to get a current balance. And so all of that is very much needed for things like ESG tracking. That wasn't the idea I had, but that's the most beautiful part of a decentralized ecosystem, is you have a concept, but you put it out there, and all of these creative people have all of these different ideas. We've also seen Maui, who's a part of Rooster Cartel. They have a physical item, and it is a hot sauce, and they're using HCS20 to track their inventory. So when they create a new case of hot sauce, they deploy hot sauce with a unique identifier of the product ID. And then they send 5 of those hot sauces to a client. They mint 5 of their hot sauces to that client ID. And so it's just tracking the movement of things. But all of the benefits of Hedera enhance its ability to give you value because it's very, very cheap. It is very, very fast, and it's very reliable and decentralized or ordered all of these benefits. The main reason why I conceptualized this and working with this was thought over back when I was at Turtle Moon for a couple of years for the NFT project HBAR. We wanted to create ways to reward our NFT community, but we didn't want to touch fungible tokens because Gary Gensler, SEC, a lot of non-clarity in regulation. This gives us an ability to reward our community without having them be able to go to a liquidity pool and exchange it for value, but they can exchange it for value inside of our ecosystem. So it's another layer of security for reducing risk tolerance. If you have a really low risk tolerance, this is a method in which you can still reward your community. And it's really hard to say all the applications of it, because I think as it continues, more and more people are going to be adding to this really cool idea. There is a lot of future development that we're still doing. We just released it 3 weeks ago, I think January 4th, so 3-4 weeks ago. In that time frame, we've seen over 18 million transactions on the main public ID, which is, I don't have enough time to go into the differences here, but there are two different ways to use this. One is secure, private, where only the person who's created these points can move them. And then there's public, which the public ID has that 18 million transactions where anyone can write to it, anyone can deploy a point, anyone can min a point, and then you can transfer and interact. This is some alpha that has not been released before, but Pluto from Hashpack shared with me that the Hashpack wallet will have HCS20 balances in the coming days after the Jubilee happens. Jubilee is a silly word. Again, I got 1 minute, so I don't know how much I'm going to explain it, but it is, it's just a resetting of the validation, because we accidentally hit enterprise scale within a week of millions of transactions when we were really only ready for a couple 100,000. So we had to update the validation to really scale inside databases. And that's all the Jubilee is. So that's going live tomorrow. We have an application that's open source. It's free for Mac, Windows, Linux. Again, just HCS20.com. You can download it and play with it. You can create points, you can send them, and then you can start experimenting with it if it's, again, in any use case that you have. And then we're going to start building on this HCS standardization. So the next thing that's coming out is badges with images on these HCS allocated points that can be owned through this method. Staking, so seeing how NFTs are staked on-chain, DAO votes. There's a lot of new standards that we're going to be working with, and we want to build a community around Hedera developers and users on how we can continually enhance your experience and our experience as engineers inside of this ecosystem that both enlightens our user experience and our value that we can get, and shows and demonstrates to networks outside of our own the value that we can give them. Because, again, in my view, Hedera is an amazing network, but its main goal isn't to become the biggest network bigger than Bitcoin. Its main ability to enhance other networks and make all other networks better as they use us, I think, is our biggest utility. And this is a demonstration of how we can do that in a contextual way and show it to other networks on why they should investigate Hedera. I don't think I have time for questions.
Patches, that was amazing. You are an absolute legend. Thank you for taking this quite complex topic and breaking it down and articulating it in a way where absolutely everyone can understand. You truly are such a pioneer in the space and in the Hedera community, and it's been so amazing having you as part of the core team. And I can attest that you have been creating ripples that will turn into waves within the team. So I'm super excited to have you on board. I'm pretty sure the entire community is super excited to see how everything within the Hedera ecosystem is developing. And thank you so much for your presentation. Solo, you're still here. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience of Davos. Our other speakers have dropped, but this call is recorded and will be posted to YouTube. Thank you to everyone in the audience who has tuned in today. Thank you for being a part of the community, and we will see you next month. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.